When I see reports like this, and I know you mentioned to me before that this is the first of its kind where you've actually gone out and got other researchers to look at the issue of race in their fields. But there are a number of reports that come out every year that detail some of the inequalities that we see in our society, and I often think, right, there's the MSNBC audience that will be receptive to this, and then the Fox News audience that may not be so receptive. And so my question for you is, it seems like there might be this element of preaching to the choir here. How do you get beyond that? Do you strive to?
Well, it's not really meant. It's not really meant to preach to the choir or because MSNBC has one editorial slant and Fox has a different editorial slant. This is material that was meant to help journalists, people who are reporting on this subject matter. And so, irrespective of what you think about it, there is a gap, a gigantic gap in home ownership in this country. And it has roots in very particular policies that are not very controversial. And so, if you are a journalist and you are covering housing, writing, the housing beat, you should know this. You could go to graduate school and spend a couple of years, mastering this huge, sprawling body of literature. Or maybe you read these synopses and it gives you a starting place to understand how these things have operated. And so one of the things that I think, what these facts mean to people can be subject to interpretation, but the facts will still remain the facts. And what we were trying to do is help journalists have access to more facts.
Understood. Speaking of history, as you're well aware of, there are efforts across this country to water down, let's just say, Black history education in schools. And earlier this year, you helped draft an open letter to education officials in Florida. I just want to read part of it. And by the way, the issue here was there was an AP African American Studies course, and officials there believed that it lacked educational value. And what the letter said in part was, this has terrible consequences for the young people of color who live in that state, end quote. My question for you is, are people of color the only ones impacted by these efforts?
No, I mean, I think that one of the things that we have to push back on is the idea that the history of Black people in this country is only pertinent to Black people in this country. And, for instance, during Black History Month, I gave a talk about the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is explicitly tied to the end of slavery and the ambiguous status that the former slaves held in terms of their citizenship. But it also is at the corner of everything now, from debates about immigration to the corporate personhood status to all sorts of other things that are integral to American life. But it begins in this one particular place. And so it's crucial that we engage with our history in its entirety. And that affects every single one of us, who live in this country. But the incentive for this, I think, has been an attempt to stifle the conversation about race and about the particular dynamics of a fairly ugly portion of the country's history.
Yeah. If this trend continues and this becomes the norm in more states, what do you think the outcome will be?
Oh, well, I don't think anything good will come from suppressing that kind of history, and we've seen, what the results of that have been. Famously, of course, is the Santayana quote. Those who fail to learn from their history are doomed to repeat it. Now, of course, the other side of it is that sometimes we repeat our history precisely because people have learned from it, meaning that there are people who really want to take us backward to darker and more difficult times. And so that is the only, I think, logical outcome that we can anticipate for something like that.